that good? Okay. All right. We'll get started then. Thank you all for your patience. I'm Meredith Drystad. I'm the acting director of the State Historic Preservation Office here in West Virginia, and I will be taking you through the State Development Grant this year. So we'll get started. So quick overview, our development grant is designed to support physical preservation across the state of West Virginia. So we do anything from, we call it a brick and mortar grant, but we do anything from, of course, literal brick and mortar to, wood facade replacement, painting, exterior things. A lot of times it's replacement of roofs. That's what we can usually fund. The funding source for this grant program is through the West Virginia Legislature, which gives us state lottery funds each year. And this year we're looking at a due date of September 30th. So we are currently accepting applications, and the deadline will be September 30th, which I'll say a few times throughout. So accessing the application, if you have not been to our website yet, I would recommend typing in wvculture.org, and you will find the State Historic Preservation Office and our grants page, where you can just use this web page as well, this link here. But all of our grant applications must be submitted through GoApply, which is our online portal. And we'll kind of talk about how that looks and what that application process looks like through the portal. And the first step is to create your user account. And the nice thing about doing a user account is that you can use that same account every year, year after year, if you apply for different grants, or if you apply for, if you need to have a Section 106 review or tax credits, you can use that same account. So you don't have to write your information all brand new again every time. So once you follow that link through WV Culture to our GoApply, you can log into GoApply, and what you'll see is at the bottom of your screen here, this will come up down here, and you will see in progress, submitted, and opportunities. And what you're going to do is you're going to click opportunities here, and that's going to take you to all of the different financial incentives, as well as joining our mailing list, and also Section 106 review, which you don't need to do. For this, you would just click this 2027 State Development Grant application, and you're going to click view to start that application. Kind of counterintuitive. There's a URL, but you're going to go to view. And then you will click print blank application to download or print the full application. If you want to just have it, at your side as you're filling this out, it can be kind of helpful. Or you can actually click apply to begin creating your application in our portal here. What kinds of things do we fund? Like I said, we do physical preservation work. Through our development grants, we do, of course, preservation, which would be the act of preserving something in its existing form. Any kind of protections from, say, weather events, or if you are subject to frequent flooding, this can be a great way to bolster foundations and come up with new plans to mitigate floodwaters and things like that. This also helps to fund rehabilitation projects, which essentially means taking, sustaining the existing form, but you're using it in a new way, or at least reusing a building that has been vacant along those lines. Or restoration is another thing that we fund, and that would be actually taking something back to its historic appearance in a certain time period. So you would probably select a time period that was significant to this property, which can be found in the National Register nomination, or something that we would help you with as well, to select a time period that you would like to restore a building to. So that might mean removing drop-down ceilings from the 70s to expose the historic pressed metal ceilings and things like that. So that's what restoration would look like. And then stabilization, as you can imagine, a building that might have been sitting for a while, something that has a little bit more of a, some challenging issues for a building, can fall under the stabilization category, just to get something structurally sound. So those are all the kinds of projects that the development grant will fund. And this is a great example in Arthurdale of them replacing the historic, the shake roof with a cedar shake roof. Our project guidelines. So all project activities must adhere to the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation, preservation, reconstruction, things like that. So you have to follow the Secretary of the Interior standards, which say that we're trying to retain character defining features. We're not going to cover character defining features or replace them with something that's not appropriate. We're going to follow those standards to make sure that the historic form, integrity, and materials can be retained as much as possible. We also follow West Virginia competitive bidding and purchasing requirements. And so basically what we would be doing there is making sure that any contractor in the state would have the opportunity to bid on a project should they be interested in that. So that's what we do with state funding to make sure that nobody's, that all the funding is not being channeled to one specific company or something along those lines. We work with you as you go, so you're not left out wondering what competitive bidding and purchasing looks like, but basically making sure that the public can bid. Submission of specifications and vendor contracts to us for approval must happen before beginning any work or making any changes to your property. So we would look with you if you say we want to replace this roof. We want to look at it with you, make sure that the contract is appropriate, and again, all the work is going to meet the standards, and that competitive bidding will be followed. So we will work with you as you go along. Also, you will need to maintain proper financial records and submission of documentation. So, again, we don't want you to charge forward and start preservation without, again, all of these boxes kind of checked. We also need to have invoices from your contractor and then proof of your paying that contractor to reimburse you. And then you would invoice us for that. So, yeah, again, we're not just going to write a blank check. We need to make sure that the money has been spent appropriately. And then lastly, you must record a covenant on the property, which would ensure its maintenance and historic integrity for a set period of time. Generally, what we can fund based on the amount of funding that our office receives each year would be a 5-year-long covenant. So that means that any exterior work to your property has to come through our office, make sure that it meets the standards still for 5 years afterwards. Generally, we don't find many issues with that. Most people are more than happy. They've just preserved their historic exterior. They don't want to change it and alter any character defining features, but happy to answer questions on that in a bit. So different parts of the application. When you go onto Go Apply onto our website, you will see all of these different parts. The very first page you will come across is a checklist, and that checklist is kind of a way that you can keep track of the things of the application you need to include and fill out. So it's kind of helpful to have that right up top and know what you need to get together and get your game plan together there. It will include as well a project name and location. So we want to know, of course, the name of the resource that we're to be funding and the location of that resource as well. And that helps us do our own research in our office. We have extensive records of historic sites throughout the state. And it also gives our grant reviewers, who are the ones making these decisions on which projects actually get the funding, it ensures that they know what they're looking at. So we'd also have your contact information. Of course, we want to let you know if you've received the grant, but also it would be the contact of the person we would be in communication with throughout the process of the grant as well. So definitely important to have. You'll also include a narrative, which is going to talk about exactly what you plan to do with the grant funding on the property. So instead of just saying, we're trying to restore this building, you want to say we need to replace the roof on this building, as well as fix up the cornice and potentially put storm windows on the exterior. So very specific work items that we need to see there. And we also need to see the reason why you need those work items too. We'd like to see your administrative capacity, and that might just mean that you're the private homeowner of this residence or of this building, but you have been managing the finances for this property. It could include that you've received grants or other kinds of funding in the past. You might include that kind of information, or just that you're kind of a decent budget keeper. It's kind of what we want to see, what your capacity is for managing this grant. You'll also want to include a budget, which will include a bid from, or an estimate from a contractor rather. So ideally, well, not ideally, you really do need to have a contractor that's going to itemize the work so that we can see exactly how much each item would cost. So if it's a roof replacement, we want to know what that roof replacement would cost versus, a full package deal. We'd like to see each individual item. So roof, windows, repointing, that kind of thing. Yes, question.
Hi, Meredith. Thank you for having this meeting. Quick question on that. And I'm sorry, I hope I'm not interrupting. I just figured I'd ask why you're hitting that particular topic. I didn't want to forget. Estimates from contractors. Is there a requirement for more than one estimate? Or what is the preference?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, for the application, you just need to have one estimate. So just so we kind of know what the budgetary framework is for the project. So nope,
Okay,
just one works. And it's always good to let that contractor know that this is just an estimate. It doesn't mean that you'd be working with that contractor necessarily, since we have to go through competitive purchasing procedures, which we'll get more into. You'll also need to include your ability to match the funding that we would give you. Of course, I didn't mention up top, but the development grant is a 50-50 matching grant. So our office would provide half of the funding and you would provide half of the funding for our project. So you'll want to include that you have the ability to provide that matching share. And that might be in the form of a bank statement or a loan or something like that we can see. Attachments and assurances, those are kind of some of the items we talked about earlier, saying that you would accept a covenant and things like that as well. And then your signature will cap off the application. Yes, go ahead.
Question on the finances. I was reading through the application, and although it says that you got to show matching funds, somewhere along, additionally, it says that you have to be able to pay all of it up front.
Yes.
So if you have, so do you only have to show, sorry, something going on, I'm outside. So let's say, I don't know, let's say I'm trying to shoot for 50,000 and I have the 25, but I have to show that I have the 25, or do I have to show that I have the whole 50? Because it was a little confusing.
You want to show that you have the ability to fund the entire project because it's a reimbursement grant. That's a very good point. And so we would reimburse it usually over the course of 3 different payments. So hopefully you would never be out the full 50,000 in that example at one time. But yes, it would be incremental reimbursement. It's a good question.
And are investment funds counted as that, as a proof of funds? If I have money in investments and I can show that I can withdraw them if need be.
Yes. Okay. I suppose if they could be withdrawn. That's yes, good questions. So yes, to be very clear about it, yes, we need to see proof that you're able to fund the project, and then we will provide the other half again through reimbursements, through usually about 3 different reimbursement increments. So other things in the checklist, you'll need to show you have a copy of the deed, and you might not own the building yourself. It might be that you are applying on behalf of an organization, or you might be a long-term lessee of the building. But either way, you need to show proof of that in some way, shape, or form, that you have some buy-in to this project. Or if you don't own the property, you certainly want to have permission from the property owner, of course, to be doing this. Again, that bid estimate, proof of available funds, as we kind of mentioned here earlier, yes, to be able to fund, usually the entire project that you're asking for funding for. Generally, I'll say our office is most able to fund maximum award grants of $50,000. We get about $400,000 from the state legislature every year. So we try to keep our projects a little bit smaller so that we can fund more projects throughout the year. So something to keep in mind. You can always apply for more funding than $50,000, but that's generally the maximum that we could award to a single project. You will certainly want to have photographs of your project. This is something a lot of grantees neglect to include. which really ends up hurting them when grant reviewers look at these projects. They can't tell what kind of building we're looking at. They can't tell what the need for this grant funding is. So photographs that really hit home how important this grant funding is to your project, whether it's showing that there is deterioration with paint like this, or whether it's showing, you know, a roof that's like looking a little worse for the wear. We definitely want full photographs of the exterior of your building, as well as any problematic areas as well. You will also want to include 3 letters of support. Those support letters are also something our grant reviewers look at very closely, and usually it could be from anyone in your community. It could be from your mayor, it could be from someone on the town council, it could be from a state representative. They write these relatively frequently. It could be from Preservation Alliance of West Virginia. It could be from your local, you know, economic development office. All of these different ways and means to have some letters of support and show that this is a resource that your community cares about. And again, the assurances, which we'll get a little bit more into. So again, project and location. You will want to have a project name, which is generally going to be the name of the property. It might be, you know, I'll use Arthurdale as an example. It might be Arthurdale Center Hall roof replacement, something like that. You'll also have the location of the project, whether that's an address. Usually it's an address, but sometimes buildings don't have addresses. So it could also be coordinates or, you know, kind of a description of the property in some way, shape, or form. And then the name of the National Register listing. We, through the development grant, fund properties that are on the National Register, and you're more than welcome to reach out to myself or our National Register coordinator to see if your building is on the National Register. That includes individually listed properties, and it also includes properties in historic districts that are contributing to those districts. So that's thousands and thousands of properties qualify for this grant. So definitely reach out if you aren't sure. For property owner, we have some examples from the application here just to show you what that's going to look like. There is property owner, and that would be the entity or the person that owns the building that is on the deed. So occasionally, well, very often we get nonprofits that might have, say, a historical society that owns the building, but a group manages the building. So the property owner would be the historic society. The sponsor in this case would be the group that manages the property. So it kind of can get a little nitty gritty with these more complicated ownership projects. If you just outright own your building, you're just the property owner, you're the sponsor, and you're the contact person. It keeps it pretty simple. So anyway, you will include all of your information there so we can easily get in contact with you. You'll include your property type. So it could be commercial property where you're making some kind of income from the property, and that can include like a rental property. It might be mixed use. Think your downtown storefronts with your apartments up top and your commercial space on the first floor. It could be residential, it could be your own private property, which would be residential. Public, which might be a city, might own the project or the property, or something else entirely. But generally it's under those 4 categories. Yes, Ben.
Yes, hi, thank you. If I own the property, I would, of course, put myself as the owner. Did you say also that I would also have to put myself as a sponsor, or do I leave that blank?
You can leave it blank, or you can fill it in if you wish. Let me double check here and see. No, sponsor is not required. So you can just do private property owner. Yes, sponsor might be if it's a more complicated ownership structure.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So on to sponsor here. If you are a sponsor, this will drop down for you, and you can pick an organization or an individual as a grant sponsor. And again, this is usually for a nonprofit or a situation where you have a long-term lease on a property. So generally, most projects don't have this specific item to fill out. And then also your contact. So occasionally your owner and your contact might be different. We sometimes have applicants who will say apply on behalf of their parents or something along those lines. So in that case, the owner would be the parents, and the contact would be the child who's managing this project for them. So that's just how that kind of works there, just so we can keep in contact with everybody who's involved and make sure everybody's on the same page too. We don't want to be funding something that somebody doesn't want us to fund, certainly. So. And your narrative is also very important. And I should have mentioned up top as well that we have an independent review panel that reviews these grants. So they do not work for our office. They're professionals in the field of preservation across the state of West Virginia. And they're different every single time. We pick a group of anywhere between 3 and 5 people who will review every single one of our applications. And some years it's 50+ applications. So they do an incredible amount of work for us to look at these, and that's to make sure that there's no conflict of interest with us. We're not reviewing them. It's this independent panel that reviews them. So they're very, very wonderful people to be doing that for us every year. So anyhow, they're also going to be very keen on reviewing your narrative. So a description of the condition of the property is really important. So we want to know what the issues are with the property, what are the historic materials that are being impacted, and then where you plan to use that funding. So you might say the exterior, masonry is, the original brick masonry. It's having a lot of deterioration between the mortar joints, and we plan to repoint that masonry. So things like that are exactly what you want to be discussing in your narrative. The historic connection between the property and the community. So why, again, is this property significant to the community, even if it's your own personal residence? You might just say this is an iconic building in, let's say, downtown Fayetteville or something, and is an important aspect of the community's heritage. The current and future use of the property. So sometimes buildings are vacant, so you might have to just talk about your future use, but always a discussion of how this building is going to be reused. And then, of course, community impact is something that you can get as creative with that as you'd like, but I think all of these projects generally have a good community impact because they are restoring a building for not just those who own the building, but for those who are driving by those buildings every day, or going in and buying their goods there, what have you. It's a really important part of the community, these buildings. Yes, Julie.
Can you hear me, Curtis?
Oh, can't quite hear you, Julie. I don't know if
we got multiple.
Oh, there you go.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
So regarding the use of the funding,
Mhm.
say we have some cost estimates, and we do, like for our whole building, but it is broken down into specific areas like the roof, the windows, etc. Say an area of real importance is more than 50,000. Can we use this grant towards something like that?
Yes, you definitely can. You will still want to prove that you can fund that entire project, because we don't want to award grant funding that kind of just sits there and waits for other funding to match it. We only have a year to use this funding. So yes, you certainly can. And this can be coupled with a number of other funding sources as well.
Okay.
So yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. It's a good question. Administrative capacity is something I mentioned you'll have to discuss. So who will be managing the grant, and what is that person's experience with either grant management or financial management? It might also be what's their experience with construction plan, construction work, and things like that. So just a kind of a discussion of that. Discussion of your maintenance plan. So are you currently, taking care of the building? What does that look like? What do you plan to do for the remainder of the building's time with you? So are you, are you considering more work after this, or will this kind of fix that issue? And then from there on, it's just kind of a maintenance thing, those kinds of discussions. Are you currently working with, say, a preservation consultant or an architect is something we'd like to know. Some projects are very large and they might have the need for an architect. So it's always good for us to know that, and that way we can discuss directly with you and the architect or the consultant. And lastly, we're just trying to ask for your West Virginia OASIS number. There's a link to get that number on our grant application itself, so you can go right to OASIS. It's a free thing to apply for. You just kind of type in your information, and that way we can fund you kind of as soon as we get the project rolling. We used to have to kind of like wait around for the OASIS numbers and try to get that all worked out, but this way it should be a lot more streamlined to have it all up front. Like I said, it's free to get your OASIS number, and you will want the person who gets the OASIS number, or the entity who gets the OASIS number for this grant should be the person who will be getting the grant funding back to them. So if they would be the ones who are paying for the work to the property and receiving reimbursement from our office is who needs that OASIS number. So that could be an individual person, or it could be a nonprofit, it could be a city. So whatever that entity is that owns the building or is doing the work to the building rather, needs the OASIS number. Okay, and then budget here, we have we shortened up our narrative a little bit this year. We're trying to have specific questions that you can answer instead of these larger open-ended questions. So provide a detailed description of existing condition of the feature. So let me back up here. With the budget, you'll discuss each item that you plan to do rehabilitation work on, and its existing condition, and then what methods and materials will be used to repair or replace those features. And then from there, you'll also discuss that item and its grant request amount. So for example here, if I'm saying I'm replacing my slate roof, I would discuss the existing condition of that slate roof and say there's water infiltration, several slate tiles are broken, I need a whole new underlayment system. So talking about the specific existing conditions of that feature. And then I'm going to say for methods and materials I'd be using to repair or replace that feature, I'm going to say I'm coming back with slate. I'll be reusing and salvaging as much slate as possible. Having new underlayment and replacing any decking where needed, and then putting that salvaged and new slate back. So kind of the what's existing and how do you plan to fix it. And then in the item grant request, I'm going to say the whole roof is going to cost me $100,000. So I'm going to request $50,000, and then I'm going to match it with $50,000. So it'll be grant request 50, match it 50. And then that will total. Any questions on what that looks like? Okay, and then matching share. So again, you're going to be matching with at least 50% of what you're asking for grant funding for. That match it's usually mostly in cash. I think it has to be at least 50% has to be in cash of your share. I'll have to double check and see what number exactly, but the majority of your match needs to be in cash. It can also be in staff time or in volunteer time, or potentially in donated materials as well. So sometimes applicants might have, say, a contractor that can get them a relatively good, say that contractor even might donate their time to do the work for this project. Because they know it's such an important historic building or something along those lines. That can be considered in-kind work to help you reach your matching share required. And it's a little bit trickier to do, but we'll work with you on that. And if you have questions specifically for your project, I think it's kind of a question that's best asked project by project, depending on what kind of in-kind that you are applying for. Just reach out to us and we can help you with that. And then you must have current documentation or proof of those existing funds to pay total project cost up front, like we mentioned. Anytime you are using, I should say too, in kind as some of your match, we will automatically use minimum wage to help match this. So if, say, volunteer staff time is considered to be greater than minimum wage, we will need to have like a resume of that person substantiating why their time should be higher than minimum wage. And again, that's usually something we kind of talk through once the grant has been awarded. Okay. And then the attachments and assurances section. So again, that's going to be your copy of your deed, any specifications or bid estimates. So if you do have any drawings already drawn up for this project, you'll include your specs there, but you will certainly include your bid estimates. That's going to be for everybody across the board. You will include a proof of available funding, like we said, to cover the project's entire cost. Photographs of the current condition of the property. We're asking for 2 per work item, again, for our grant reviewers to get a better sense of what work needs to be done. And then at least 1 photograph of the entire property's exterior so they can get a sense of the context of the work. And then those, again, those letters of support. And final assurances and the signature are going to be the last part of the application here. And these are going to be basically, I want you to make sure you please review these before you sign off. Acknowledge that you understand that payments will be made as reimbursement. So, we can't cut a check and, at the beginning, we have to work with you on the process and make sure we're going through the proper purchasing procedure and that all work is adhering to the standards. So that's why we do it reimbursement style. So, make sure that you understand that. Acknowledgement that you will sign a covenant if funds are awarded. So the covenant will be placed on the property, like I said, usually for 5 years. It will be attached to the deed to ensure that any exterior work still meets the standards. An acknowledgement that in order to undergo rehab, the existing building, with the exception of residential structures, must be evaluated for asbestos and must be remediated if found. I'll say we rarely have this issue because that's rarely what we're usually working on with these projects. Usually we're working on a roof, and that usually doesn't have asbestos. Occasionally it will, but generally it does not. And then again, a commitment to follow the guidelines that we have laid out throughout the application. Construction programs, federal form 424D, which is a really very, very dry document to review as well, but just a single page. And then you will sign and date the application at the end, saying that you acknowledge all of these assurances. So to give you a sense of what the funding priorities are for our grant reviewing panel, they are asked to prioritize funding from categories 1 to 5. The first being the highest priority of funding and the 5th being the lowest. So work to weatherproof the building's envelope or make it structurally sound are the #1 funding priorities. Of course, we want to make sure our buildings are sound. So that's why we fund so many roof projects, because those are usually what these buildings need, #1. #2 would be rehabilitation of exterior features, particularly those which offer protections. So that could be painting and replacing where needed exterior wood siding. It could be window rehab and things like that. Rehabilitation of exterior features which are not necessarily required for stabilization and protection. That could be like your cornice and your bracketing, your kind of more decorative elements that are still character defining to this building. And then 4 and 5 are generally interior features. Character defining interior features, stairs, wood floors, and things like that, and work necessary to facilitate putting the building into an appropriate use, which would be things like, HVAC systems, electric and things like that. Unfortunately, those are just lower priorities because we're usually trying to stabilize these buildings, or at least make sure they're weather tight. So that's generally just based on the amount of funding we have to give out each year. Those are the funding priorities that we try to follow. Yes, good question.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. My name's Beth. When you're talking about the funding priorities on our project, we learned more recently that there's an interior problem. That the building was built in 1894 and there is a huge wooden beam that supports the second floor. And we've learned that there's deterioration on either end of that beam, and that it will be important for us to do something to shore that up in order to make use of the second floor. So to me, well, when I read the guidelines, I think that fits within a funding priority, but I'm not sure how high up it would be because it's interior.
It is interior, but I think because the work would be to make it structurally sound, it would still be under priority number 1. So that it can kind of supersede the exterior or interior of it all if it needs to be done to make the building sound. Yes.
Okay, that's how I interpreted it, and I appreciate you listening to that. And
absolutely, yeah, it's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I think Alexandra, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had one. It was back before for the covenant that's attached. Would you be able to go over some of what, like the restrictions that are implemented when that covenant is signed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The covenant is just an assurance that you will work with our office on exterior work to the building for the next 5 years after the grant is completed. So, really, it's me that reviews these for the covenant as well. So basically, what you would do is reach out and say, we need to, say, fix this element of the building. We're going to replace things in kind, or do it in a way that's appropriate to the historic character of the building. And I'd work with you to make sure that that's all checked out. And usually, I get back to you the same day via email usually.
Okay.
With projects like that, so it's usually not too comprehensive if you kind of know what you're working with. But it will be attached to the deed. So, say if you were to sell the property a year after doing this project, it would still follow to that next owner as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if you do have any questions, my email's at the end. I'd be glad to email you. Anyone who wants to see what the covenant template looks like, I'd be glad to email you a template too, just so you can feel comfortable with what you'd be signing. Okay, so general timeline here, just to give you the kind of 10,000-foot look here. September 30th is when our grant applications are due. And that's again through a Go Apply or Akoya Go on our website. October 2026 is when our office will review applications for completeness and eligibility. We do not want to take any applications out of the running. So what we're trying to look for is sometimes people won't include some documents, and we'll reach out to you and say, it looks like maybe this was cut off when you submitted it or something like that. So we're going to try to make sure that the applications are complete and make sure that all the projects are eligible, which in this case would be that they're in the National Register. Then the following month, November, we would assemble our qualified independent review panel, which is going to read through all of these grant applications and score the grants using a standardized scoring system. And again, you can see more of what that looks like on our website too. We want to make sure, we like to, as I say, like have an open book test here. We want to make sure how they're going to score these things, so that you can have your best application, enter into the race here. And then in late February 2027, that's when the Archives and History Commission meeting will next meet, and that commission makes the final recommendations so they take the recommendations from the grant panel and they either approve those recommendations or do not approve them, but they pretty much always approve them. But it is something that we go through to make sure that public money is being spent appropriately and things like that. So, and then in early March of 2027, those grants that are approved by the Archives and History Commission would then be submitted to the governor's office for final approval or denial. And again, they generally approve all these grants. It's sort of step to make sure that the state funding is all understood by all parties. And then in mid-March, applicants would then be notified in writing of the determination. So in April of 27 is when we would start this work and start to put all of our paperwork together, get our contracts in order, and return the grant award letter to us with signature. So that's kind of what the timeline looks like. We like to explain why the process takes a couple of months, because we've got to assemble panels, make sure everyone can review things, make sure it gets in front of the Archives and History Commission, and then the final go around at the governor's office, and then we can move that funding out. Any questions on the timeline? Yes, looks like we've got one from Martha.
Meredith, not necessarily on the timeline, but I do have the side of my building, the brick masonry, a portion of it is popping out. And I had a structural engineer look at it, and he recommended that at least that piece needs to have some work prior to winter, or else we risk the chance of all that brick popping off the building. The brick masonry is one of the biggest item that's going to be on my grant application. So if I was to mediate that for winter, so I'm just really concerned that it's going to pop off. And since the grant won't be, it looks like it's something that's going to be beginning of next year. If it's something that I went ahead and took care of before winter, would it be something that I can then submit, or no?
No.
Even though the application would be in?
Right, it's a good question. No, if you even if you apply for that funding, if you've already paid for it and gone through the process, unfortunately, we could not reimburse that through the grant. All work needs to be done post grant award, where we go through the state purchasing procedure. So unfortunately not. If there's some way to shore it up, if it's a little bit more of an affordable way throughout winter, I hate to tell you that, because it's, you'd hate to lose the side of a building.
Right.
But unfortunately, no. Yeah, that's
Okay. All right. I'm meeting with someone on Friday, so maybe we can do some kind of temporary showing up and give us time to wait on, hopefully, the grant.
yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. All right. On to, let's see, reminders. Okay, so final reminders here. Applications are due September 30th by 11:30 p.m. Our grant portal is Go Apply again, and can be found on our website, which is WV as in West Virginia, wvculture.org. And if you have any questions, or our office is also happy to review a draft of your application. We don't get a lot of folks taking us up on that, but we are more than happy to look over your application with you ahead of that deadline, and give you feedback. Yes, Martha.
Sorry. That was exactly what I was going to ask, actually, if there's anybody available to kind of review the application with us ahead of time, to just make sure it's complete, that it, that plug any holes that might, because this is my first time writing one. And so I just want to make sure that it's good.
Absolutely.
How do we go about doing that, requesting a review of it?
Yeah, so the best way to do it would be to, either just email me directly. We are currently hiring a grants coordinator, and I'm hoping that we can bring that person on in the coming weeks here, and that way we can have somebody dedicated to this full time again. But until that time, just feel free to email me. But yes, we're happy to look at drafts, or if you have questions about things and think, should I do this or should I do this? What kind of work should I be applying for? Just let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We will not be accepting drafts after, I will say, 5 p.m. on September 21st. So that's your deadline for drafts. Again, the applications themselves, the final version, is due September 30th, but just the drafts for us to review before submission will be September 21st. That way it gives us enough time to review everything. Okay, Alexandra.
I was curious about the estimates that we'll be attaching from a contractor. The contractor that I've been working with so far, just to get us estimates as far as we've come, they typically expire, 30 to 90 days after it's issued. So with the timeline, by the time the recipients are chosen, the estimate will likely have expired. Is that going to be a problem?
No, because basically what we'll be doing is you might not be working with that person who provided
Okay.
that bid to you, that estimate. We have to go through state purchasing, which means that we have to have an open bid process again. So it's always good to let anyone who's giving you an estimate know that this is in order to get a grant. And so, yeah, that's absolutely fine. We want to have an estimate that's as close to the grant deadline as feasible. We don't want you to like run it down to the wire or anything like that, but within a couple of months of the grant deadline, which would be, anytime now, would be a good time to get an estimate.
Okay. That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yes. Ben.
Yes, hi. Just want to make sure that I understand correctly. So right now, we have our roof to be replaced, and we have it scheduled for June. I don't know how that will conflict with the application process and, with the bidding and all that stuff. Should we not schedule the replacement in June? It'll be after the application, but I'm not sure how that will affect, if we need to wait for scheduling.
Right. It's a good question. I don't recommend necessarily scheduling it because, like I said, we still will have to go through state purchasing procedure, which means you could end up with a different contractor. And certainly the contractor that you, may have an estimate from or something along those lines is somebody that you could send the document out to like your RFQ out to, and they could certainly apply and get be awarded the grant or the work. But I don't recommend necessarily having that sort of prepared just in case you do end up having to go with a different bid. So good question though. Any other questions on that? Okay. I think we might be at our end here, but feel free, this is my contact information here. Feel free to reach out with questions. Susan Wood, should you have questions about the actual application portal itself, is our information systems, our IT person here at the SHPO, and she's phenomenal. She will gladly help you through the process, or if you somehow get logged out or locked out of your grant or something along those lines, she can go right in and fix it for you. So she's a whiz behind the computer, and I am less so. So I would say she is your best bet for those kinds of questions, and I'm here to help with your grant, the content questions. So I will stick around for any other questions, and if anyone has some, feel free to reach out now, or if you also want to email me or give me a phone call afterwards if something comes up, or if as you're filling out your application, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.
Thank you for all your help.
Sure. Ben, question?
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but
No.
just another question about timelines and stuff. So, I believe that our roof is due for a replacement rather quickly. I mean, I think we've got time, but I don't think we've got 2 years. So, my other question with the bidding, how does the bidding process work? If the roof is in need of replacement, would that be taken into consideration if you have contractors that bid maybe lower than the other ones, but they are able to schedule it later versus earlier? I mean, does that matter, or is it basically just whoever comes in lower bids?
It is. We do take the lowest responsible bid, and generally we've not had issues with those contractors being able to get the roof on there before fall. We have these grants organized now such that we are preparing things in the spring, and then usually we can get to work with all of our ducks in a row in early summer. So usually that's kind of the process now. So yeah, we've not really had issues with say a contractor not being able to get out there for like 2 years or anything. But if it comes to that, we can certainly look at other alternatives if there just isn't going to, because we do have a limit to our grant funding. We do have to usually spend it within a year. So it's a good question. I'm hoping we don't run into that. I've not run into that, but if we do, like I said, we will see what we can do to avoid waiting too long.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I guess I might be the only one with questions. The picture for the exterior of the house,
Yes.
you said the whole house. So do you mean like a street view of the house, or I'm not?
Yeah, so basically, yeah, if you would just like walk to the other side of the street and take a picture of the house, that kind of thing, so we can get the whole house. Some folks will just like send just a really close-up picture and we can't get a sense of what the whole house looks like.
Okay.
Our grant panelists year after year always say we'd like to see a whole picture of the house, and so that's why we ask for those.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be like completely around the whole house, just maybe like get the whole house from like the street.
Correct. Yeah, that might be the best way to phrase it. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think that's all the questions I had, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate your questions. They've been very good.
Hi, Meredith. Quick follow-up. Can you submit more than 2 pictures per area?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. The way Akoya is set up, you might not be able to submit more than 2, but if you needed to put them into like a PDF and attach them to your application to show a few more pictures, you're more than welcome to do that as well. I think there's a place at the end to attach additional information. So maybe that would be the way if you do have more photographs. More photographs are always good for telling the full story. So yeah, I don't want to prohibit that, certainly.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I have one more real quick one since we're finishing up here. Our project has intended to be just a roof replacement for right now, but looking at this, now that I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit more, we do have a couple of windows that maybe should be shorn up, and then the interior damage from the roof deterioration as well. Do you find that projects with one specific purpose are typically, they have better success in being awarded the grant funds? Or because the roof is definitely the priority, but if we're able to make this work and get all of the damage fixed at the same time, that would of course be ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I recommend you include more than one work item, certainly.
Okay.
Because sometimes we're not able to fund, we might be getting to the end of what we can pay out, and we say, well, we can't afford a whole nother roof with what we have left over in our grants, but we could afford, say, like some window.
Okay.
So definitely include all of that. Additionally, as weird as it sounds, sometimes we get to the end of, we actually award these out, and some people will say, I don't need the money anymore. I don't want to.
Oh, yeah.
The grant. So we might have money left over. So if you have that in your application, that's something we could always fund based on priority ratings that the independent review panel gives it. So yeah, definitely include as many different items as you'd like, for sure.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. Well, I think this recording will be posted on our YouTube or something along those lines, and then the slideshow will also be available to folks. So if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. Hopefully we're not too hard to find. If you go to wvculture.org, you can find our contact information, as well as what's right here. So thank you all. I think we'll end it there, and good luck in the grant application process.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.